Hello and welcome back for yet another episode of UFC by the numbers. This is episode 3. Let's get right into it. So UFC 3, The American Dream, took place September 9th, 1994 at the Grady Cole Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. There was an in-fan attendance of 3,000 people, and the event did about 90,000 in pay-per-view buys, which is quite a steep drop-off from the 300,000 that they saw with UFC 2. We had some very familiar faces on the commentary booth. We had NFL legend Jim Brown, Brian Kilmeade, and Ben Perry returns to join in the commentary team, as well as also being the post-fight interviewer. And the ring announcer was still Rich G-Man Goins. And once again, your referee for the entire evening was Big John McCarthy. We did have some new faces that were also cage side. We had Leon Tabbs, who was the event's official cutman. Leon had been boxing since the age of 13 and winning the 1948 Silver Gloves title as a featherweight. He went on to work many MMA events in the future, but he may best be remembered for his work in boxing with the future Hall of Famer Bernard Hopkins. Leon retired from the fight game in 2012, and after retiring, he received the Mixed Martial Arts Lifetime Achievement Award at the World MMA Awards and was inducted into the Pennsylvania Boxing Hall of Fame in May 2014. And Dr. Joseph Eswanek was the cage-side doctor or medical advisor for the event. He was a North Carolina-based orthopedic surgeon. He served as the team doctor for USA Boxing at multiple international events and was also the president of the Association of Ringside Physicians. He was also the doctor to many professional wrestlers in the 1980s, and he famously treated Dusty Rhodes' ankle injury in the run-up to his match with Ric Flair at Starrcade 85, for all you wrestling fans out there. Dr. Eswanek, along with Ken Shamrock and a few others, was instrumental in developing the original Boxergenics grappling glove. The original gloves designed by Dr. Eswanek all had a little red cross on them, and he continues to use that cross as a symbol today for his medical practice. The event went back to using 8 competitors instead of the 16 that they had for UFC 2. The winner still received $60,000, and there were no alternate bouts, but they did have alternate fighters that would take the place of any injured competitor. And the rules haven't changed too much from the first 2 events, but there is some slight changes. There's still no rounds, no time limits, and no judges. And as will become quite obvious, there were no weight classes. However, fighters can't kick if they decide to wear shoes.
It's very interesting. He's wearing shoes, Ben. Jim, he's wearing shoes, which means he cannot kick. That's right.
Also, the referee was allowed to stop a fight now if the fighter was unable to defend himself. Emmanuel Yarbrough. Emmanuel was from Rahway, New Jersey. He had achieved NCAA All-American Division II wrestler status in 1983 and 1985, and later ascending into Division I in 1986. In 1992, Yarbrough started competing in amateur sumo competitions, and he quickly became the World Amateur Sumo Champion, leading him to be one of the most famous sumo wrestlers outside of Japan. He went on to win silver medals in the Sumo World Championship in 92 and 94, as well as a bronze in 93. This was Yarbrough's only UFC appearance, and he later went on to go fight for the Japanese organization Shuto, defeating Tatsuo Nakano by smother. Pretty rough. His final MMA appearance was in Pride 3, where he lost to Daiju Takasi by tapping due to ground and pound. He would also go on to have some late night TV appearances on David Letterman and Conan O'Brien. He also appeared on the HBO drama Oz as inmate Clarence Seroy. After his initial UFC appearance, Yarbrough increased his weight by 282 pounds, reaching in excess of 828 pounds that awarded him the Guinness World Record for the heaviest living athlete. Keith Hackney. Keith Hackney was from Roselle, Illinois. He was a Taekwondo and Kempo karate black belt. His black belt came under Tom Saviano's White Tiger Kenpo system. Was undefeated as an amateur boxer with a 12-0 record with 11 knockouts. And he got into the UFC by responding to an ad asking for fighters. And in your very first fight of the night, we have Emmanuel Yarbrough versus Keith Hackney. Emmanuel Yarbrough coming in at 6'8", 616 pounds against the 5'11 and a half and 200 pounds of Keith Hackney. Keith comes out and immediately lands a front leg side kick to the knee of Emmanuel. Keith circles a bit more and then lands a massive open-handed right, which puts Emmanuel right down to the ground. Hackney tries to jump on Emmanuel, but Emmanuel ends up getting up on top of Keith and landing a few strikes himself. Keith luckily gets up to his feet and clinches with Yarbrough, and Yarbrough throws him right through the octagon door, busts it right open, and Keith goes flying. Keith eventually gets back into the octagon, they square off again, and after a bit of circling, Keith tries another open-handed overhand right. Keith keeps moving and landing a few more kicks and other strikes, really using his speed to get away and keep Emmanuel on the outside. Emmanuel eventually grabs one of Keith's legs off of one of his low kicks, and Keith starts hitting him with a few short right hands, and Emmanuel goes down again, and Emmanuel is flat on his stomach, taking some big hammer fists from Keith. Emmanuel finally gets up to a turtle position, but just keeps taking more blows to the back of the head, the side of the head, to the side of the face. Big John starts asking Emmanuel if he wants out, and Emmanuel verbally taps. And Keith is going to move on to the semifinals. Ken Shamrock. Ken is from Warner Robins, Georgia, and trained as a professional wrestler under Buzz Sawyer, Nelson Royal, and Gene Anderson. Many of you will remember that he lost to Royce in the semifinals of UFC 1 and could not compete in UFC 2 due to injury. He had fought several times in Japan under the Pancrase promotion after UFC 1, including fights with Bas Rutten and Matt Hume. He was coming off a submission loss just 8 days prior to UFC 3 to Masakatsu Funaki. With the rise of MMA, Ken started his own gym, the Lion's Den, in 1994. And over time, as we'll see, the Lion's Den was recognized as one of the top MMA gyms in the late 90s and early 2000s. Christoph Leninger. He's from Scottsdale, Arizona. 4th degree judo black belt and was a 1984, 88, and 92 U.S. Olympic judo team alternate, 2-time U.S. national judo champion, and 2-time U.S. judo open champion. He was also a silver medalist at the Judo Pan Am Games in Havana, Cuba in 1992. Ken Shamrock versus Christoph Leninger. Both guys start by circling around the octagon, and after a while Christoph fakes a few entries, and Ken connects with a quick right, which draws a really bad takedown attempt out of Christoph, and Ken is able to take Christoph down and put him on his back. Leninger quickly retains his full guard and lands a lot of short shots to the top of the head of Ken. Both throw a little headbutt here and there. Christoph tries a few times to open his guard and look for a possible submission, and eventually almost gets Ken in a triangle, but Ken easily slips out and ends up taking Christoph's back, and Ken starts to posture up, and Leninger takes some more big shots before eventually tapping due to the strikes, and Ken is going to move on to the semifinals. And Leninger is just lying on the octagon floor with no cornerman, no doctor helping him, no nothing, no one cares. Harold Howard. Harold's from Ontario, Canada. Harold Howard with a great WWF style promo. He's got the look and everything.
We have a saying back home that if you're coming on, come on.
He had a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu under Steve Reynolds and in Goju Ryu Karate under Yogi Israel. In 1984, Harold was the first Canadian heavyweight sport Jiu-Jitsu champion and represented Canada in the first World Jiu-Jitsu Championships sanctioned by the World Council of Jiu-Jitsu organizations. Howard captured the Canadian Heavyweight Karate Championship 3 times in 82, 83, and 84, and was a member of the Canadian National Karate Team in 86 and 87. Roland Payne. Roland was from Charlotte, North Carolina. He was a Muay Thai practitioner. The only other things I could find on Roland was at some point several years ago he did have a gym, Roland Payne MMA, and this was his only MMA event. Harold Howard versus Roland Payne. Howard starts off with a few quick strikes, and then Roland shoots a surprise takedown, gets reversed by Howard, but is able to come up and avoid a big kick by Howard, and he ends up taking Howard down and moves right into side control. Eventually Harold is able to reverse Roland, but in the transition Roland comes up for a single leg, but ends up taking a few big elbows right to the back before Howard attempts to suplex him, but he really just kind of falls back, and Howard is able to flip Roland with his feet, and both guys come up to a double front headlock position. When they break, Roland lands a few kicks and a knee up against the cage, but Howard comes back with some big haymakers, big uppercut, lefts and rights, has a big connection right to Roland's temple, and he goes down, and Howard lands one more big hammer fist to Roland while he's on the ground, and Roland taps just as his corner throws in the towel, and Big John comes in and calls the fight, and Harold Howard is moving on to the semifinals. Royce Gracie, and it's the obvious return of the UFC 1 and UFC 2 champ. He was the 1994 Black Belt Magazine Competitor of the Year and 1993 Fight Matrix Fighter of the Year. Kimo Leopoldo. Born in Munich, West Germany, his family moved to Hawaii when he was just 4 months old. After meeting his training partner and future manager, Joe-san, much more on him later on, he turned his attention to mixed martial arts, studying the first tapes of the UFC, in particular Royce Gracie. And it's said that he even turned up to Art Davies' office demanding to be put on the next UFC card.
My secretary came in and said, there's 2 crazy guys with no shirts on who just drove up in a Porsche convertible, and they're yelling, and they want to be in the UFC. It was Joe-san and Kimo.
Royce Gracie versus Kimo Leopoldo, and Royce again coming out with his family in the iconic Gracie train. Kimo comes out carrying a massive wooden cross. Joe's son, Kimo's manager, is talking some smack to Royce before the fight starts. Kimo comes out pretty quickly, but throws a really slow right hook, which Royce avoids and immediately clinches up with Kimo. Royce pushes him back against the cage, and Kimo is fighting hard to keep Royce away from him so he doesn't get taken down. And for the second time tonight, the fighters break through the octagon door. When they get back in the octagon, Royce keeps Kimo against the cage. Kimo keeps defending the takedown attempts. Royce eventually gets the double underhooks and sweeps out Kimo's leg, but Kimo is able to counter and ends up taking Royce's back and gets both hooks in, and does a pretty good job of controlling Royce, all things considered, but he does get a bit high up on the back, and Royce slips out into half guard and moves right into mount, but Kimo immediately reverses and ends up in Royce's guard. Royce opens his guard and starts looking for an armbar or possible submission. Royce eventually gets Kimo back into his full guard, grabs Kimo's ponytail, and ends up looking for a triangle, but Kimo postures out. Royce grabs the hair again and punches with the other hand. And Royce eventually makes it up to his feet, but Kimo is right on his back again. And Royce is looking for the standing Kimura, and when they go to ground, Royce immediately starts looking for the armbar, and he eventually secures it and goes belly down for a little extra pressure, and Kimo gives the most gentle tap I have ever seen, and probably you will ever see in your entire life. I'm not sure if the tap was actually from the armbar or more from exhaustion. This was by far Royce's toughest fight, and Royce is basically carried back to the dressing room. He is exhausted. And Royce Gracie, again, moving on to his 3rd straight semifinals. Felix Mitchell, one of the alternate fighters. He was from Antioch, Tennessee. He was a student of the SSF Submission Academy in Clarksville, Tennessee, training under Ron Daly. Mitchell entered UFC 3 as an alternate after Keith Hackney injured his hand in the opening round. Felix actually looks like he was wearing some first-generation MMA gloves, but he was made to take them off before the match began and just left his hands taped up. And moving on to the semifinals, we have Felix Mitchell versus Ken Shamrock. Both guys start just by staring each other down for a bit, and Ken eventually shoots for a takedown from pretty far out. They clinch up and Ken tries to get the fight to the ground, but Felix resists and ends up against the cage with Ken having double underhooks. Felix reverses the position and throws a headbutt, but he's still trapped with Ken having the double unders. And Felix eventually turns Ken around and gets double underhooks of his own. They alternate positions and trade a few blows while against the fence, but eventually Ken is able to secure the takedown and moves right into mount. Ken throws a couple of punches and Felix immediately turns to his stomach, exposing his back and his neck. Ken is able to slide his arm under the chin this time and sinks in a rear naked choke, ultimately forcing Felix to tap. And Ken gets up and he's limping, but he's going to be moving on to the finals to fight the winner of Royce Gracie and Harold Howard. Semi-final number 2, Royce Gracie versus Harold Howard. Harold comes out to the cage. He looks pretty fresh. He's bouncing around and he looks ready to go. And Royce comes out again with the Gracie train. And there's just something about Royce's body language here. He just looks tired. He looks defeated already. And when he gets into the octagon, he really doesn't look much better. He's got his head down the whole time, not looking at his opponent. Horian is talking with him along with a few of the other family members. And Helio eventually throws in the towel before the fight even starts. And Royce Gracie is out of the competition. And Harold Howard is going to move on to the finals without having to fight in the semifinals. And then, just like something you'd see in pro wrestling, Kimo and Joseon rush the octagon to take responsibility for Royce having to forfeit the fight, but are quickly rounded up by Big John and escorted out of the octagon. And Harold Howard is going to move on to the finals without having to fight in the semifinals. Steve Jenham. Steve is from Omaha, Nebraska. He entered into UFC 3 as the second alternate, replacing Ken Shamrock to go straight into the finals. He was an active police officer with the Omaha Police Department at the time of the event, and he was a high-ranking black belt instructor in Robert Bussey's Warrior International, just like Scott Morris from UFC 2. We started off with 8 competitors, and now we're down to the final 2. Steve Jenham versus Harold Howard. So Steve Jenham gets to fight in the final without having a single fight, and Harold Howard got here without having to fight in the semifinals. So it's been pretty interesting. Harold comes out with a few big feints and then launches a rolling thunder type kick, quickly gets to his feet and lands a nice right hand. Howard throws a few more strikes and they clinch up, and eventually Howard gets a standing front headlock. Howard goes for the guillotine, but Steve goes to ground and starts passing to the opposite side to relieve some of the pressure. Steve is eventually able to free his leg from half guard and escape into side control, but he escapes too far and allows Harold to get back up to his feet. They both exchange a few shots, but eventually Jenham is able to get the takedown right into side control and moves straight into mount. Hits Howard with a good shot. Howard, I think, goes out for a second here, but comes back too, and Howard has zero defense on the ground. He just has his arms out like a mummy trying to defend himself. Big John is warning Howard's corner to keep an eye on their fighter, and Jenham cracks him a few more times, and Harold taps just as his corner throws in the towel. And Steve Jenham, having one fight in the evening, is your UFC champion. Straight into the finals, straight into the history books as the tournament winner for UFC 3. And that does it for another episode of UFC by the Numbers. This is another great UFC event. Some really good fights and some really weird stuff happening. Really fun to watch. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.